If I grab a point light, I'll make sure that the point light originates roughly where the particles are. If I increase the intensity of the light, you'll notice that I can blow out the effect as well, without affecting the intensity of the point cloud. If I use light fall off, I can have the light start falling off from a distance from its center, so let's say 40 units, so that it doesn't have a significant impact on anything further. So if you set the light fall off to something like an intensity of 1 with a start fall off of 40 and 100, you can even go to probably about 75 before light starts to fall off. And I can even turn my light into an area light with a spherical shape to try and change the samples a little bit, the way that the area light is calculated. I could also use a linear light fall off instead of an exponential fall off and reduce the fall off, something like this. You'll notice with the exponential fall off that you get a very crisp, almost spotlight type of feel to the light's illumination. So I'll set it to linear. That should work out a little better. I'm also going to change the color of the light and pick a color from my point cloud. And I've also got some specular contribution here. So I'm going to look at actually changing the shader on this road. If I go to my environment model and I go to my pathway, I'm going to modify the shader and just reduce the specularity on that strip of road there. I should probably do the same thing for the grassy area as well. So this light would be my explosion light. And I can also use it in my ice tree. So if I select my point cloud, open the ice tree, select my explosion light and drag it into the graph, I can, actually I don't need to pull it into the graph. What I need to do is set data on it. So I'll find a space here in my ice tree where I can plug it in. I'll plug it in after port 8 here, and I'll get a set data. So if I look under data access, set data, I'm going to explore for my light, explore for my explosion light, and explore for the intensity factor on that light, and control that value. So you can see how I'm able to control the light this way. So what I want to do to control it is to use some of the attributes from my tree. So I think if I use the current time and the function curve node, which is driving my rate, that should do something similar. So let's try pulling that in. Again, our intensity is a scalar value. So you can actually see exactly what's happening there. Our light is now amplifying based on the intensity values of the rate in the function curve that's driving my rate. The problem is it's probably a little bit too intense. If we want to, we can multiply or divide by a scalar value. So if I look under my math tasks and I multiply by, or let's divide by scalar in this case, I'll drop it on the appropriate stream. And I'm just going to find some room for this here. This tree's getting a little bit unwieldy. And so if my rate is 2500 at its max, I definitely don't want the light to have an intensity of 2500. So I can divide by, let's say 1600. So I can get a light that's bright, but not too bright. So you definitely get this lit area that dies out as soon as the particles start to lose their energy. Okay, actually in the ice tree here, I'm also going to delete this modify particle color. It's having an effect on my alpha channel that's dying out over the life of the particles. Okay, and I think that should pretty much do it. I've got my multiply by scalar here. I think everything is looking pretty good. What I might actually do is, in my function curve, I actually have the light, or the value, actually turning off completely. And I don't want my light to turn off completely. So maybe what I'll actually do here is copy and paste this node, use current time, and use it to drive my light intensity exactly the way this function curve is, except on this one, I'm going to always have a fraction of light available to me. So in my key properties, I'll raise the value of this light to, say, 1. So my light intensity is 1.549, and it drops down to 1 right away. So I think what I can keep on doing here is playing around with this curve. I'll raise it up a little bit. So my light has an intensity of 0.5. It should definitely have an impact on the scene. So let me continue to work this value. And at this point, it's its most intense. So maybe what I can do is even pump this one up a little higher as well. Let me just resize this light property page. So from the beginning of the scene, light has an intensity of 0. It ramps up very quickly to 1500%. Maybe I'll take it for the initial explosion to 2200%. We really want to blow this out. Let's see how bright that is. Yeah, I think that'll work. Maybe even just get the color more away from a yellow and just into a very bright, bright, bright blast. Have a little touch of yellow in there. So towards the very end of the scene, the cloud loses a lot of its intensity, and we're back to our kind of our normal shot. Okay, so let's try and see how this works. The shot 3.5 seconds before the particles die out. So we should definitely have this finished by, I would say, around 150. So let's render these frames out and see how we perform. So I'm going to bring this rendering out in a flipbook after I go through the setup. So let's go in here and set up our frames. I'll go to my pass options. I'm going to call this the explosion. I'll set a frame range for it. Let's say 1 to 160. And that should probably do it. We could probably even turn shadows on for these particles. It's a very low umbra. Let's see if this works here. Yeah, we're getting some interesting shading from the particles themselves. Yeah, I think that'll actually work out pretty well. So we haven't actually destroyed the building yet. That'll actually be another part. But as far as the explosion goes, let's render it and see how it works. Okay, so we get the quick die off, and I'll set the render to go. Render current pass, and we'll come back when the render is all finished. So I hope you've enjoyed what we've shown you so far. Let me actually just change one more thing in my scene options. The pixel ratio I want to set to 1.0. So we'll come back in a little bit once this renders done. It should be an hour or so.